Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, the bank that puts you first. They can meet your banking and financing needs for personal, agricultural, business, commercial, mortgages, and so much more. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. Happy start of the second semester, Hokie Nation. Both men's and women's basketball have had an eventful couple of weeks, experiencing both big wins and frustrating losses. What can we take away from a busy week on the hardwood? Plus, some new Hokies have arrived for the spring semester, adding to the roster on the football front. Our guys are here to tell you why and who these people are and how much they matter. It's coming up next on episode 341 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and it starts right now. We record on Tuesday, January 16th, 2024, from our studios at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Remember to like, subscribe, and refer the show to a friend, or head over to thetechsideline.com to check out our extensive editorial content. As always, the first month of subscriptions is free. I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. Across the way, our senior staff writer, Mr. Andy Bitter. To my right, Chris Coleman, our lead analyst and columnist. In the fourth chair, our managing editor, David Cunningham. And behind the scenes, hosting our mustache man, Mr. Nick Brown. Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, but the Tech Sideline podcast is also brought to you by the Hokie Way. In their second year in operation, the Hokie Way thanks Virginia Tech fans for their support of our mission to leverage student athletes' name, image, and likeness in support of charitable organizations. To learn more about us and the organizations that we support, visit thehokieway.org. We got a jam-packed show for you here today. We're talking football, we're talking men's and women's basketball. Football crew starts off our show today, and it starts with the new freshmen in town on campus for the spring semester. Andy, overlooking thoughts here, how important is it to get these guys in town, get them in early, and get them going here quick?
Important to a degree. I think what's notable is there's so many early enrollees. They have 14 of them. We're going to have 15, so it's like Davy Belfort has to finish up some classes to graduate high school early. Or finish high school on time. Just had a few classes he had to wrap up and couldn't get here early. That's been a thing under Brent Pryce. They've had a lot of these guys coming in early. Now, transfers, of course, you're going to want to get them in early, but they also have 9 freshmen, I believe it is, that they're coming in at the mid-year. So a little bit more important, I think, for the transfers than the true freshmen. You don't really see a lot of true freshmen play, regardless of whether they enroll early. And I went back and I looked at most impactful freshmen that they've had here. And in the last couple of years, the biggest impact has been Monsieur Delane. He enrolled in the summer, so he wasn't even an early enrollee. So I think just based on playing time that's available, it's not going to be that key that these true freshmen are here right now. But for the transfers, you're talking about a pretty big spring. You think about last year, Kyron Drones coming in, what the spring meant to him, sort of getting introduced to the offense. I mean, these are the guys that are going to be on the field. So I'm looking at somebody like Sam Brumfield in particular. Quarterback of the defense has to learn the calls, learn the system, get in tune with everybody on the defensive side of the ball so they're all on the same page. I think that stuff is very important. And the earlier you get here, the more you can sort of hone that craft.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. Important for the transfers. I think for the freshmen, it just means an extra semester in the weight room and in getting acclimated to college earlier. The weight room time is very valuable. Look, not very many true freshmen are going to play this year for Virginia Tech. Only 5 of the 25 true freshmen from last year's class did not redshirt. So, and it's going to be even fewer than that this year because it's a smaller class and Tech is bringing back almost all their key players, and they filled all their glaring holes in the portal. So I think there's like 15 true freshmen in this signing class. I don't think more than like 2 of them will play this year. I think the rest will redshirt, and even the guys who I think are really good. Like I think Emmett Laws is a very good player, but Tech brought in 3 transfer defensive tackles and returns 2 veterans. I think Keelan Adams is a very good prospect, but like your top 7 wide receivers are either very proven or somewhat proven. And it's a run heavy offense, so it's going to be tough for a true freshman to break into that rotation. So like, I think somebody will play, but like I could actually see a scenario where no true freshmen, where like they all redshirt this year. I think that's possible. I don't think it's likely, but I think it's possible. So I think for this particular year, I know everybody gets excited about freshmen and everything like that, but it's just not something that I think is crucial this year because Tech brings back so many experienced players. But I do think on an individual basis, like there are guys that extra semester in the weight room will really help them where, you know, they don't have to worry about football yet. It's not like they're game planning for an opponent. Guys can just really pay attention to their own personal development. But as far as like having an impact on this year's team, I don't think these early enrollees. I don't think it's that type of season for Virginia Tech. I think this is very much a reload, or not even a reload. I mean, you're not even reloading to a certain extent. You're reloading at defensive tackle, but your other positions, everybody's coming back. So, like this freshman class, it's a small class, but you know, it's a class for the future, not the present.
Allow me to bring everybody up to speed with exactly who is on campus here to start the spring semester. 14 total scholarship players. We'll start with the transfers. Sam Brunfield, the linebacker, defensive tackle Kamari Copeland, offensive lineman Montavious Cunningham, defensive tackle Kelvin Gilliam, and then defensive tackle out of Duke, again, the big one, Aeneas Peebles. That was a guy that you were very excited for there. And then out of the high schoolers, wide receiver Keelan Adams, cornerback Joshua Clark, defensive end Derek Dandy, defensive tackle Andrew Hanchuk, defensive end Gerard Johnson, running back Tyler Mason, safety Quentin Reddish, wide receiver Chance Wiggins, and then linebacker, we know him very, very vocal on Twitter, Gabe Williams is on campus. He's officially in Blacksburg here. So I kind of bring you back to, okay, what does this mean? How big can this be? Do you see anybody on that list? Obviously, the transfers are kind of plug and play, freshman-wise, that has the opportunity to come and make an impact, because there were some freshmen this past season, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, that got some burn.
You know, I think if Tech had only brought in like 2 transfer defensive tackles, you know, Emmett Laws was a guy. I think who could definitely stick his nose in there and play to a certain extent. Maybe he still does. I don't know. I think Keelan Adams has the talent to do so. But again, there's so many proven wide receivers already in the program. If he can beat out a couple of those guys, he's more than welcome. But you know, he's got to earn it, right? They've got to earn playing time. So yeah, like I said, I think it's a good class. But because Tech brought back so many players, I don't think there's going to be opportunity for a lot of these guys to play this year. Maybe Gabe Williams if they start him off at star, but that's somewhat dependent on Keonta Jenkins. If Jenkins leaves, that opens up a spot on the 2 deep at star. Now, maybe they move Kelly Lawson to star, maybe they don't. Or maybe next year they would just go with Caleb Woodson and Gabe there. Some of it, but most of the early playing time that might be available, it's more dependent on the older players, in my opinion. I just don't think this is going to be a year where my true freshman report articles, I'm not even sure they're going to be necessary. I didn't do a lot. I used to do them like once every 2 weeks, and I only did like 3 of them this year because just not that many freshmen were playing, so there was nothing to report on, really. But I think there's going to be even less to report on next year.
Yeah, you look at this list, and you know, size and strength is typically a disqualifier for anybody in the trenches. Mm-hmm. I mean, certainly offensive line, you just need to get bigger. I mean, you're just physically bigger than a lot of the guys you play in high school, and that's not going to be in the case in college. You have to learn technique, and you know, everybody is strong in college. You have to figure out how to you know, counteract that. So you don't typically see a lot of true freshman offensive linemen play anyway. Defensive line, I think, is kind of in the same boat. Maybe a little bit more opportunity to play on that side of the ball, but I don't really see a need for it right now. You mentioned wide receiver. They got a lot of receivers here, a lot of young receivers that they got to figure out how to get a chance to play anyway. It might just be wise to redshirt those guys. Now, maybe they force the issue if they're really that talented and that dynamic of players, but it's just tough to see right now when you have all those veterans and even the young guys like, you know, Aiden Green, Chance Fitzgerald. You know, where's the spot for them? How are they going to break through and play?
Aiden Green, let me jump in here and add this. I wrote my true freshman report today for the entire season. He had more non-special team snaps than any other true freshman this past season. So this is a guy who played 308 offensive snaps as a wide receiver this past year. And even his snaps might get eaten into with Ali Jennings coming back.
Right, exactly. You got another veteran coming back in that room. So that'd be really interesting to see how Fontel Mines handles that. That's usually a position that has a little bit of ego that comes along with it. I mean, you want the ball. If you're a receiver, it's going to be tough to do that. There's only one ball to go around. I'm looking at this list, and the one player that maybe stands out to me a little bit is Quentin Reddish at safety, because I don't feel like safety is, I mean, you have to look at opportunity. Safety is not exactly a spot that is just, flush with returning players. Jalen Stroman is the one returning starter there. He just had surgery, missed the bowl game. I'm not sure how long he'll be out in the offseason, if he'll be ready to go by springtime. Mose Phillips is a young guy there. Jalen Jones is there as well. I think Christian Williams will be there.
He's kind of a tweener type.
Yeah, sounds like he's sort of between both. Devin Alves, I think, was working at some safety late in the season. So I don't exactly know what the safety crew is going to be there this year, but it's not like there's, Nasir Peoples and Jalen Stroman. You go, well, they're your obvious two starters. Like this year, I think it'll be Stroman and Mose Phillips, maybe.
But of those two who plays free safety, they were both strong safety
I mean,
types.
I feel like there's some interchangeability with those two, so we'll see. But I think of all the positions, that's the one that there's some opportunity for a true freshman. Possibly minimum could work his way into the two deep there, but possibly even more. We'll see how he does once he gets here. I mean, it's kind of a crapshoot how these guys get here and how they acclimate to college, because you want to go down the signing day list and go, oh, this guy's a 5-star or 4-star, he'll play right away, and that's not always the case. I mean, it's just maturity, how ready you are for schoolwork in addition to the stuff on the field, how well you handle it, and whether the opportunity is there. Sometimes it's not who you would expect to be the first guy to play.
You're right. I agree with you on safety. The problem there is that's the position where you don't want it to happen, because if you look back through the years, the last Virginia Tech true freshman before Mose Phillips to play significant snaps at safety was Jimmy Williams in 2002. And he didn't get on the field till the end of that year when there were a bunch of injuries and the defense started to collapse, right? How'd Mose Phillips get on the field this year? Injuries and targeting at safety. He was Virginia Tech's lowest graded defender this year amongst all the regulars. And I think he's going to be a very, very good player. I'm just using it as an example of how hard it is to play safety as a true freshman. Like you've seen, like Shamari Connor played as a true freshman, Reggie Floyd played as a true freshman, but it was like 30 snaps on defense and then 150 snaps on special teams. It wasn't 250, 300 snaps like you saw Mose Phillips had to do this past season. It's not ideal at all to throw a true freshman safety in there. It takes a while to pick up that position. There's not a position on the field outside of like Mike linebacker where you combine the run responsibilities with pass coverage. And that's why like the angles, the speed of the game, it's just a lot for a young player. They're not used to quarterbacks being able to pass like college quarterbacks. Certainly you're not used to that at the high school level. It's easy relatively to come in and play as a true freshman corner. Tech has had a ton of guys do that through the years. They don't have true freshmen to play. It's safety. It just rarely ever happens. And if it does, it's born out of necessity rather than actual, oh, this guy was really dominant and we just couldn't keep him off the field. So if there's any position Tech wants to go out and continue to address in the portal, could be safety in the next window.
Well, that's the spot that it shows up. If that guy's not experienced. I mean, you can sort of, if you're a receiver and a true freshman and not quite there yet, like you just don't catch a lot of passes or something like that, right. Or you're bad at blocking or something like that. It doesn't completely just decimate the play, but safety, you're the fail-safe on the defense, and if you're not there, you can see a lot of big plays going over the top, and I think you saw a lot of that this past season. So ideally, no, you don't want him to have to play a major role. I think if you're Tech and you're looking at like, can he get some special team snaps, work him into the defense a little bit if those veteran guys continue to progress and are the 1, 2, 3 you'd expect with Stroman, Jones, and Phillips.
I'm gonna put my thought on hold for a moment and take us where Chris has taken the conversation here, and that's to you go into spring ball and then spring wraps up. Where else could Virginia Tech maybe look to add? You mentioned safety out of the transfer portal because that opportunity will be there.
I would never turn down like an offensive lineman that I thought could help, thought had a legitimate chance to start. And I don't think the coaches would either, if it's the right fit and at a position of need and everything like that. What might surprise some people is Virginia Tech is looking at running backs and quarterbacks. Tyler Bowen, there's a JUCO running back that he's looking at, that he's personally scouting. I think they like Malachi Thomas is a good, solid running back, but Malachi Thomas was an inside zone guy whose game is all about vision, cutting off the blocks. You saw it when he was good as a true freshman 2 years ago against, and he had those back-to-back 100-yard games, and he was breaking off big runs against Syracuse. You could see it was his vision on those inside runs, the cutback stuff. That's not the type of plays that this Virginia Tech offensive line is good at blocking. Nearly all of Tootin's yards this year came on the outside, on outside zone type plays. And this JUCO running back, Therese Worthy, I believe is his name. He is an outside guy, very, very fast guy, outside back all the way. I think Virginia Tech might consider him to be a better fit for the strengths and weaknesses of this offensive line. So he's someone they're taking a look at.
Where's he from?
He's a JUCO from Maryland.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Out of high school, he was MVP of the Big 33 All-Star game, which is Pennsylvania versus Maryland. And there's a quarterback they're looking at, and gosh, from an FCS school, I forget which one, but he was a very productive player. He's a big guy like Drones, and he's an experienced guy with only 1 year left. So that means they're looking at, they want more experience in their quarterback room in case something happened to Drones, but they also want someone like Drones in terms of size, so you don't have to change the offense very much. You kind of wonder if in the future Virginia Tech, they would like a certain prototype of quarterback in there. I don't think that necessarily tells you anything about, Pop Watson per se. And quite frankly, if I were that kid, I wouldn't come to Virginia Tech. I wouldn't spend my last year of eligibility sitting on the bench. Right.
Well,
So
I mean,
don't think
if
that's
you're
gonna
coming
happen.
in, you're coming in with the understanding that you're the backup.
So why would you do that if you're already starting somewhere else?
Yeah, I don't
Right?
know. Maybe
Yeah.
just want to come get a degree from Virginia
Enter
Tech or
Saban.
something. I mean, it's,
maybe.
who knows what motivates some of these guys. I think you look at the quarterback situation. They have three really young quarterbacks after Drones. And Drones is a guy who runs the ball a lot. He takes some punishment. I think if you're a coach, you would like to have somebody who's, taking more than some garbage time snaps in college, which is basically all they have with Pop Watson and Dylan Whitkey so far. So, I think it's just a comfort thing. They go, well, what if Drones goes down for like a series or two and checking him out on the sideline or something like that after a big hit? Like, you would like somebody to go in there and be maybe not just a caretaker for the offense, or that like just don't screw this up at this point. You have to prepare for that contingency. So, we'll see. The roster's tight. I mean, they still need attrition at this point, and they'll get it. I mean, they always get it to hit the 85 number, but then a little bit more if they want to add anybody else. So it's tight. It'll be interesting to see how they manage it.
And to be clear, I don't know that Virginia Tech has offered either one of those players. I just know that they're doing their research and they're trying to figure out what's right for them.
So you look at everybody that enrolled early last year for Virginia Tech, going into year number 2 of Brent Pry, going into last spring. Only 2 of those guys really even touched the field this year. That was Aiden Green. Mose Phillips, I believe, was in that conversation. So, Andy, can you talk a little bit about how this doesn't mean everything, the fact that these guys are coming here early?
Yeah, I mean, we looked at the guys who made the biggest impact in the last 5 years as true freshmen. Mansour Delane probably was the best one. He didn't enroll early. He got here in the summer. And in fact, not only got here in the summer, but he was injured in August, and that's why it kind of delayed his start. And he really came on in the second half of the season. So I'm trying to think back at other true freshmen that were pretty big impact guys.
Dorian Strong was not an early enrollee. Even if he had been, there was no spring practice because of COVID.
Exactly. Right. Trey Turner, Dax Hollyfield were early enrollees, I believe, when they got here. Tavian Robinson, I cannot remember if he was. Yeah. He kind of emerged as a punt returner that year. Even going back to under Beamer, like Isaiah Ford, Cam Phillips, when they were freshmen, they weren't early enrollees. They got here and they were just like that good and that, adjusted mentally to be able to step into college and be able to handle all the responsibilities that come with that. I think sometimes we overlook that fact that, like, this is, think of the transition for just a regular student going from high school to college and everything that, all the pitfalls with that and, landmines that you step on at that point, and then add football on top of that and a whole other responsibility. So it's really tough. And it takes a certain type of person to be able to handle that. And sometimes it's tough to tell who can handle that and who can't. So I would just caution that you look at these early enrollees, you're like, well, these are the guys that are going to play early. It's like, it never really plays out that way. It's usually just how, well-adjusted that player is for the opportunity. And then they actually have the opportunity with, playing time being available.
Anything else on the football front before we shift gears to a little bit of men's hoop here?
No, I think Andy covered it all. You'd like to get Belfour in, which was the original plan, but again, it's not a huge deal because if Virginia Tech needed a true freshman quarterback this year, then things aren't going well anyway.
Right. I mean,
So
they have two quarterbacks
Yeah.
that aren't much further along than true freshmen as it is ahead of him. So,
Right. So it's just, and I agree with Andy. Like it's cool. It's a cool thing to talk about, but the whole early enrollee thing is a little bit overblown, but it is good to get them in early. But at the same time, I don't think it significantly changes their chances of having a big impact in their first year. For most true freshmen, it's more about, are they needed to play rather than, they're just so good you can't keep them out of the lineup.
I mean, since the last time we did the podcast, some pretty major news has happened in college football with Nick Saban retired. I don't think he retired by the last time. That's seismic in college football. You think about it, and think of this: if Jim Harbaugh goes to the NFL, you're talking about Alabama and Michigan replacing their coaches at the same time. After we had thought that the coaching carousel had died down to this point, so it's interesting now that Kalen DeBoer moving, Jed Fish going up to Washington to replace him. San Jose State guy gets promoted up to Arizona. I mean, there's like this other round of the coaching carousel going on. I think if Harbaugh leaves.
Which I think will happen.
That would be 3 of the 4 playoff teams that will have lost a coach.
That's insane. An insane amount of movement. And who was the guy that stepped in for him when he was suspended? I mean, he was suspended for half the season.
Half the season.
It was the offensive line coach
was
and co-offensive coordinator, I think.
Sherrod something.
Yeah.
I forget his
Sherrod
name.
Moore?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that his name?
Yeah.
I would think that he would be a pretty hot internal candidate for. I mean, he stepped in and he won all those games in Harbaugh's absence for that.
It's hard to do better than 100%.
If you want to keep that just machine going and what you have going at Michigan, it would make sense if they would just promote him internally for that. But I mean, it's just this crazy amount of turnover. Like, this is the end of an era in college football. And it's weird. He got there the year before I got to Auburn. So his second year when they pounded Auburn in Tuscaloosa, it was like 36-0. It was Tuberville's last game there. That was sort of the rise of the Alabama dynasty. And that was a long time ago now, and they were still going strong all the way until the end of that. I mean, I don't think you're ever going to see a run quite like that. I mean, what do you win? 6 national championships in Alabama? That's insane. So, I mean, it really feels like we're at the end of an era college football-wise, not only going from the 4-team playoff to the 12-team playoff coming up, but realignment, these super conferences starting to come into focus here with 16, 17, 18 teams, 20. Is the Big Ten going to have 20? I've lost count. Change your name, Big Ten. Change your name so it makes sense. Nick Saban retiring feels like very much the end of an era and sort of a turning of the page where, like, how long did everybody say, like, as soon as Nick Saban retires, then all these other schools have a chance? Like, it'll be interesting to see if, this machine that he built in Alabama can continue churning out, titles now that he's not there running it. Like, everybody thought, Alabama is this, Death Star that they've created there. It's like, well, a lot of that had to do with Saban. We'll see if somebody else can command that thing.
You think they got the guy that they wanted there in DeBoer? No, he was like third, fourth choice.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think you look at, Dan Lanning sounded like he was the name right out of the get-go once that happened. And he pretty quickly said no, or said he was staying. He didn't explicitly say about Alabama. I think Sarkisian would have been a guy. I mean, he knew Alabama. He was an offensive coordinator there. I'm trying to think of who else might have been on that list initially. I think DeBoer is a nice one. Norvell, Mike Norvell
was
would
the
have
other
made
one.
sense.
Yep.
I think those guys look at that and they go, man, that is a no-win situation. Like if you're going into Alabama, and if you lose 2 games next year, they're going to be calling for your head.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how quickly it goes. I mean, you saw just at Virginia Tech, you see how replacing a legend goes for the next guy. And now Justin Fuente made some missteps along the way here, but I think he draws a little bit more ire from the fan base than perhaps he deserves just because he was following up the legend. He didn't live up to those standards, then that's a lofty expectation. That was even after 4 years of decline at the end of the Beamer era. Think about Saban. He's coming off a playoff appearance. Now that's considered a decline for them because they didn't win the national championship, but I mean, that's just a tough act to follow. You don't want to be the guy that follows the guy.
It's the toughest act to follow maybe in the history of the sport.
And such a patient fan base for any sort of missteps that this next coach might take.
First time they lose to Auburn.
Somebody said, I think he hired the defensive coordinator, was the head coach from South Alabama, who was the defensive coordinator, I think, at Indiana during the COVID season. Somebody's like, if you would have told me that Alabama would be replacing Nick Saban with the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator from Indiana, like what they would have been like, what drugs are you on if you're saying this? I mean, that's how ridiculous and crazy this sport can change in, blink of an eye like that.
Yeah.
I'm just happy I got to see him throw his headset once in Lane Stadium.
There you go. What game was that?
LSU
2002 LSU game.
I covered that one. I was at that. Yeah.
Tech won 26-8.
I believe I was in Danville at the time.
Yeah.
Assisting Nathan Waters in covering that game up here.
No kidding. On that note, we'll switch it over to basketball. Take a short break here. It's episode 341 of the Tech Sideline podcast. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Hokies fans, to episode 341 of the Tech Sideline podcast. We swap out Andy. He makes his 4th chair debut. David is on set. Chris to my right, as always. And we're talking men's basketball here. Listen, big win for the Hokies against number 21 Clemson last week. Felt in control the majority of that ball game. Felt like it maybe could be a turning point. Didn't quite feel like it was a one-off, right? Felt like it could be a little bit of momentum. And then Tech follows it up with a tough, close loss to Miami. But I want to start with this. I'd be amiss if we didn't talk about it. Sean Pedulla, he's been terrific. ACC Player of the Week, back-to-back 30-plus point games. I ask you guys, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Obviously, it's great that he's scoring, but he's got to be Superman, and he shouldn't have to do it all by himself.
Well, the good thing is that he's done it pretty efficiently. It's not like he's out there taking 25 or 30 shots a game, and it's taking him that many shots to get 30 points. He's been pretty efficient, very efficient, actually. He had a good game against Florida State, too. I know that doesn't get factored in because it wasn't this past week. So it's been 3 games in a row for him where I think he's been pretty good, and very good specifically in the last 2. It's good. It's a good thing that he can do it. You can also see that there is a little bit of, opponents are showing him a lot of respect. Like the last play of the Miami game when they just doubled him at the top of the key and left MJ Collins wide open. That was just, we don't want Pedulla shooting that ball no matter what. So I think he's getting a lot of respect from opposing coaches from that standpoint, and deservedly so.
I think it's important to look at his other contributions. He had 10 rebounds against Miami. It's not like he's, Gio, you said he's like playing like Superman, but it's not like he's taking a lot and missing a lot. He was 9 of 16 against Clemson. He was 13 of 23 against Miami. He's made 11 of his last 23 3-pointers. He's made his last 10 free throws. He's grabbing rebounds left and right. He has 11 assists in the last 2 games. He's playing good basketball across the board. I think Sean, and this is from chatting with him after games, that injury really took a toll on him a little bit because he had to sit back and watch. And even though, Tech was playing American and Valpo, right, you still want to be able to play. And he's kind of taken it, and then I guess I should say he came out against Wake Forest and did not play very well. He was still injured, and he had 6 turnovers in that game. He is, since the start of the new year, like you said, Chris, he had 26 points against Florida State. He's been a much better version of Sean Pedulla, and I think he's letting it flow to him more. He's just kind of, kind of letting it come. And he's taking what the defense is giving him. He's not necessarily forcing it all the time. Yes, he's taking some shots that, as Mike Young said, make you go, oh, okay, what are you doing here? Oh, he made it. Okay. So it's good and bad, but also you got to factor in Hunter Cattoor's injury too. And I don't know if Sean Pedulla necessarily scores 32 if Hunter Cattoor is playing, because a handful of those shots are going to go to him. And we'll talk more about that, but I think he's playing very well right now. He's not necessarily running around like he has to try to do everything. He's not forcing it. He's getting his teammates involved too, and he's rebounding the ball well. 7 assists and 2 turnovers against Clemson. Like, that was part of the reason why Tech won. Now, against Miami, Tech didn't take care of the ball. Part of that was on Pedulla. But he's still doing everything else. His contributions are necessary to Tech's success. Tech's kind of going as he's going right now, and I think that's a good thing, because I liked how Tech played on Wednesday, and I liked how Tech played on Saturday against Miami. That's a team that went to the Final Four last year, that brought in Matthew Cleveland from Florida State, lost 2 key contributors, but returned the other 3, essentially. That's a team, like 3 or 4 of those guys played at the Final Four last year. That's something Tech has not experienced. Yes, that was a Miami team that just lost to Louisville, but the way Jim Larinaga put it after the game was, well, all 5 or our 4 main players, 4 of the 5 starters, 3 of them had ankle sprains, and one of them had something else going on, I forget, or was sick or something. He's like, we didn't practice leading up to the Louisville game. And they practiced, they played like they were healthy against Tech. That's not a bad loss. People are going to look at it and go, okay, well, you couldn't beat Miami at home. Well, Miami's been a top 25 team all year, just lost a couple close games. I think that is, without Hunter Cattoor, to only lose by 4 to Miami. Obviously, there are some things you want to learn from. You can't turn the ball over that many times, especially in some of those critical situations. But Tech's playing much better basketball since the last time we talked.
All right, what's the latest? What do we know about Hunter Cattoor, his injury, his status, and, obviously how big is his absence? It feels like deja vu because this happened early in conference play last season.
I will read you the quote. I asked Mike Young about Hunter Cattoor on Monday's Zoom call for the ACC teleconference. Every Monday, once ACC play starts, we get a chance to talk to all coaches from around the conference on a Zoom call. They each get 10 minutes, except for the coaches who who have games on Monday night. Mike spoke right after Tony Bennett yesterday and said about Hunter Cattoor, quote, he's feeling a lot better. He's got some tests and some markers he's got to achieve before he's cleared to play on Wednesday. I don't know any more than that. Time will tell if he's in uniform on Wednesday. Mike has been as expected. I expect nothing different. He's been very cautious as to not say as little as possible. There have been injuries in the past where, I even go back to Sean Pedulla's injury, where he was like, yeah, I think Sean's going to be fine. He literally walked. Mark Berman asked a question about what happened to for Sean to get that injury, and he walked him through what happened and the steps they took. It's a little bit different with this, probably because it's a head injury. And he admitted it was a head injury. Whether that's a concussion, I would assume that's probably the logical thought, that it is a concussion. But, the hope is that Hunter Cattoor can play. I wouldn't expect him on Wednesday. I think if he was going to play, maybe Saturday at NC State would be more likely. You also have to think, he might be healthy enough to get back to playing, but has he practiced? And it's a 2-part thing there, where you have to recover and then you have to get back into game shape, back into practice shape. So all things considered, I like the way Virginia Tech played without Hunter Cattoor on Saturday against Miami. MJ Collins wasn't perfect. He's still got a ways to go, but I thought he played pretty well defending Nigel Pack. He's a tough guy to guard. I can't imagine Virginia Tech trying to play last year's Miami team without Hunter Cattoor, because you got Isaiah Wong and Nigel Pack. Yeah. I thought MJ Collins did fine. I think you're starting to see a little bit of wear and tear when Tech doesn't have Cattoor. You start to see like Mike Young was he was being deliberate in his substitutions. He was making sure he had the right defensive matchup on Nigel Pack that he wanted, more so than the offensive matchup. He was trying to balance it. He played Jaden Young a little bit. He played Brandon Rexheimer a little bit. And Brandon Rexheimer came in and turned the ball over twice. So, like, what you need, this is when you need stuff out of your freshmen. Against Clemson, Hunter Cattoor goes down, didn't play the entire second half. Tech got contributions from the guys it needed. Robbie Barron played well. Mekhi Long played well. Tyler Nickel had a great game.
Yeah.
Against Miami, those contributions weren't necessarily there completely. So if you're going to play a man down like that, who I would say is the most important player on the team, maybe not the best, Pedulla would be the best, but the most important, I think, because he's kind of the
most well-rounded.
Yeah, he's your best defender, and he's a three-point specialist, and he does all the little gritty things. You got to get contributions from everybody else. So that's what I'm looking for on Wednesday, but I think it's a very winnable game for Virginia Tech.
Do you think things are a little bit better with this team since the last time we talked? We were kind of not necessarily hitting the panic button, but we walked out of here saying, yeah, I mean, the postseason look is glum. And then they rip off a big one a couple days later against Clemson.
I thought the last 3 games, I thought they've played better, a lot better. I thought outside of a 2-minute stretch, about 4 or 5 straight offensive rebounds against Florida State.
It was more than that.
It was more than that, but it was 8 of their 11.
It was
eight in 3 possessions.
Yeah, in 3 possessions. Outside of that stretch, I thought they played pretty well against Florida State. Obviously, they played well against Clemson. And I thought they played well against Miami, considering they didn't have Pedulla. So I think from a team standpoint... Cattoor, you're right. I thought from a team standpoint, they are hitting their stride right now, which you would hope. Unfortunately, it coincides with Cattoor not there. And I do think they would have beaten Miami. You don't know this for a fact. You never know this for a fact. But you're talking about a fifth-year senior who's a lockdown defender and can hit 40% of his three-pointers. He's not replaceable by anybody else on the roster. You lose that game by 4. And I think Tech probably would have won.
And I think one of the biggest things is there was nobody else once. It felt like once Pedulla got double teamed, there was nowhere else to go with the ball on that final possession. MJ takes the shot. Cattoor probably takes that shot.
There's no way. There's no way you can defend Virginia Tech like that on that play if Hunter Cattoor's in the game. No chance.
I think that's the biggest thing. When it gets down to crunch time right now, Pedulla is the only guy that really has the will to do it. You know, for all of the great things Tyler Nickel did against Clemson, he had a career high. He came off the bench and had a career high 24 points, and he grabbed 4 rebounds. You want to look at his second and a half stats against Miami? He was 0 of 2 from 3, 0 of 3 from the floor, had no points, had 2 assists, and that's what I talk about when I say that the margins are so thin. When you don't have your most important player, you need guys to step up in key situations. People were reaming MJ Collins on Twitter for that shot. Here's the thing, he just made the one right before it from that same exact spot. And like, I know maybe he's not the guy you want taking it, but that's because Sean Pedulla's got like 2 or 3 guys on him. And in those situations, right, I think you see how badly Hunter Cattoor is needed for this team. If Hunter Cattoor gets back, Gio, I think this Virginia Tech team can start to put some things together. Now, it's not an easy slate by any means. You've got 2 games on the road here, and winning on the road, doesn't matter where you play, is not easy. But this is a UVA team that is not playing very well, and an NC State team that's kind of been hit or miss. But you're going to have to play good defense and bring that physicality, both of which Cattoor is kind of key for. So if he can't go, that's not saying Tech's not going to have a chance to win either, but it just makes things a little bit more difficult.
Go ahead, Chris.
UVA's offense is bad enough that they could keep Tech in the game for sure. Now, they are unbeaten at home. They're a much different animal at home.
Tough place to play.
Yeah,
place
it's a tough place to play.
And they don't like Virginia Tech very much.
They certainly don't. I think they're a little bit resentful that they don't feel like Virginia Tech should be any good in basketball at all.
Right.
Because historically, from their perspective, Virginia Tech has not been. I mean, this is a school that's been, gone to Final Fours and won a national championship and things like that.
Well, we got this, though, more recently than they do.
That's true.
The Virginia Tech Hokies, baby.
The Virginia Tech Hokies. Where's our the Virginia Tech Hoakies? Where's our Go Hoakies?
Yes.
Somewhere around here.
Anyway,
What do we know specifically about UVA? And I didn't mean to cut you off, Chris, if you have more to say there.
Well, I was going to say this is Tony Bennett's second worst offensive team in his career at Virginia. This is his 15th season. That kind of tells you where UVA is. The team that was worse was that 2020 UVA team, which of course did not play in the NCAA tournament because of COVID, but it had the number one defense in the country.
right.
This UVA team was 18th in adjusted defensive efficiency. Very good defensive team.
They always are going to be under him.
Yeah.
But when you go on the road and can't hit shots, it affects you. And that's what UVA's experienced.
12 minutes left in that game the other day, and they had 30 points.
Yeah.
Yeah. Andy, like, you don't cover basketball. So you're unbiased.
I've covered some low-scoring basketball before. I covered Dick Bennett at Wisconsin.
Yeah, there you go.
Tony Bennett was actually a team manager on the Final Four team. I covered at Wisconsin in 2000.
Okay, that's interesting.
I mean, they called him a team manager.
Of course,
he didn't
right.
pick up towels and stuff. Trust me, a former NBA player was not doing that at the end of the bench. But,
right. All right. So
I mean, it was the pack line defense. That's that's where he learned it all, was from his dad.
no
Dick Bennett.
doubt, no doubt. So you're used to seeing basketball like that. Yeah,
Yes,
very much so.
as a
Okay.
Wisconsin grad, yes, I've seen some very low-scoring, ugly games.
As someone who doesn't cover basketball, doesn't cover Virginia Tech basketball, you're not a Tech grad, you're not a UVA grad. Give me your unbiased outside point of view on UVA and Tech right now in this game, heading into it. What do you think?
This game, I mean, I'm kind of surprised how much UVA struggled this year, just because you mentioned year 15. You figure have all the pieces in place, you'd have an idea, a plan of how you want this thing to go, and it just has not worked out very well for this team. And obviously the Cattoor injury for Virginia Tech, pretty major in this one. I think it's two teams that are just trying to find themselves right now. We'll see if the result on, is it Wednesday this week? Wednesday night will, tell one direction or the other. It might just be one struggling team beating another struggling team, and it doesn't mean a whole lot in the big picture. But I think this is a game that both teams need pretty badly right now. And typically, you're not talking about that for the Hokies and UVA. One team's typically UVA in the past have been way up in the standings, and can Tech knock them off and get a big win like that? UVA hasn't really been struggling like this in quite a while. So I think it's kind of a different dynamic to this game than what's happened the last couple of years.
You mentioned that UVA is undefeated at home. UVA has lost 3 of its last 4 of its last 6, but all losses have been on the road.
Right.
Beat Louisville at home by 24, and this is a UVA team that's very, very streaky. Reese Beekman is one of the best players in the ACC. That was what the Cavaliers returned this year. Reese Beekman was kind of the one main starter. Ryan Dunn, obviously, he got some key minutes for them as a freshman last year. So did Isaac McNeely, and that's kind of the core. Those 3. UVA brought in a lot of transfers, and similar to Tech, I think the guys are still trying to figure it out. Andrew Rohde came in from, I want to say, a D2 school. That name is escaping me, but it might have been from Minnesota. But it's a lineup that is not very good offensively. Much better on the defensive end, but offensively, it's kind of similar to Virginia Tech, where you got Isaac McNeely who can make any 3-pointer if he gets half a second to shoot it. And you've got Reese Beekman, who takes care of the ball, is a great passer, and can score when needed. But if that's kind of your only offense, you're going to struggle.
Even the best systems in the world do need a difference maker or two. I sat in a room before when Buzz Williams called Mike Young one of the top 5 offensive coaches in the country, and I agree with that comment. But when you lose Justin Mutz, there's just not that many power forwards on this earth who can lead the team in assists 2 years in a row. I mean, he was that unique. Losing Mutz changed the dynamic of the entire offense. And then you lose Rice, who was supposed to be your other starting guard. And now you've lost Cattoor on top of that. So Virginia Tech, 2/3 of Virginia Tech's original starting backcourt for this season did not start that last game against Miami. They still almost won the game. But I think it just goes to show that, with the best systems in the world, it's just not just plug and play, right? You still need some difference makers. I mean, Tony Bennett's not doing anything different now than he was when they won the national championship. It's just they
just
had
have
like
better
3
talent.
first-round picks on that team.
Yeah, they were that season in adjusted offensive efficiency. I believe they were second.
Right, yeah.
and they were fifth in defensive
They were
efficiency.
actually better offensively than defensively that year. And this year they are what offensively?
167th.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, so to compare it to Virginia Tech, Tech is 67th, right? But 61st in defense as opposed to 18th. So I think it'll come down to Virginia Tech's ability to play defense. Tech is going, if Hunter Cattoor can't go, MJ Collins will probably guard Reese Beekman. Keyhead Clark is gone, so Sean Pedulla doesn't have to worry about handling him on both ends of the floor. I mean, he was just this crafty guy who could kind of always pull a rabbit out of the hat a little bit. Very shifty. This is a game that Virginia Tech can win, but Tech's going to have to go in with the right mindset and the right attitude, even if it doesn't have Cattoor, and try to win this game. But I was going to say, Tech. So Virginia lost to Wake Forest over the weekend. Did not have a single player score more than 10 points.
Oh my gosh.
That was Reese Beekman.
Yeah.
Andy's got something for
Oh, I
us.
was curious. I wanted to ask David this because he'll know better than I would. I mean, it seems like Virginia Tech would not be in any tournament at this point, or the NCAA tournament at this point. But you look at their resume, it doesn't seem like they have any huge negatives working against them. There's not like some loss to just a Q4 team or something like that. How are they situated if they could get things going here a little bit in the second half of the ACC season?
I'm glad you asked. So Tech is 3-3 in Q1 right now.
Right.
Boise State.
Do they jump up top 50?
Boise State is top 50.
Are they 50th?
No, they're like 45th.
Are they really? When I looked last week, they were
State's
58th.
Been, Boise State's been very good. Here, let me pull it up. I actually screenshotted this to put it in my article earlier today. So Tech has played 6 Q1 games. Boise State is 44, Iowa State is 9, and Clemson is 27. So those are the 3 quadrant 1 wins. Tech is 3-3 in Q1. Now Tech has 3 Q2 losses: South Carolina, Florida State, and Miami. Tech is situated okay right now.
They actually have more Q1 wins they did this time 2 years ago.
And Tech has, as the schedule lines up right now, starting with the Virginia game on Wednesday, Virginia Tech has 6 quadrant 1 opportunities remaining, except 5 of them are on the road.
Sure.
This is what it comes down to. You have to be able to win games on the road away from home. And right now I look and go, okay, Virginia Tech has Virginia and NC State. Those games are both this week. You've got 2 quadrant 1 games this week, and you might not know if Hunter Cattoor is playing or not.
I know.
Duke comes to town in about 2 weeks, but then you go to Miami, you got Carolina, and you got Pitt, all 3 on the road, and those are all in mid to late February. So you've got some time. Tech is in an okay spot right now. The non-conference schedule paid off. If South Carolina is your biggest non-conference blemish, and South Carolina is 55th, 5 spots away from being a Q1 loss, yes, Tech got destroyed by Auburn, but Auburn's the 8th team in the country.
Right.
The Florida Atlantic loss wasn't great by 34 points, but Florida Atlantic is is number 26 right now. The biggest thing is I look at what Virginia Tech has been able to do on the road this season, and it hasn't necessarily been great. Last time Tech went on the road was to Florida State. Before that, it was Wake Forest. You have to be able to win on the road. That defines whether you are an NIT team, a bubble team, an NCAA tournament team. If you can go on the road and win. And I think that's this week is huge for Virginia Tech's resume. If Tech splits, say Tech beats UVA and loses to NC State, or vice versa, that is a win in textbook, because you pocket another Q1 win, and you the loss is a Q1. Now what you can't do is you can't go and lose on the road at Notre Dame later in the year, right? Because that's a Q3 win. The Q3 loss, that would damage your resume. But right now, and I think this goes for a lot of the ACC teams, besides the ones that have not lost to Louisville and Notre Dame, like UVA. Virginia Tech is in a good spot where it doesn't necessarily have a bad loss. Like, yes, some losses are by a lot of points, but it's not a, oh my God, you lost to the worst team in the world. Like, one of the reasons why Clemson got left out last year because it lost to South Carolina.
Yeah.
That was a terrible, terrible loss.
And they lost to Louisville.
And they lost to Louisville. And they lost to Loyola
just as bad
Chicago.
loss.
Yeah.
You can't lose bad games.
Yeah.
And right now Tech is in the position. Tech is going to have to play a lot better basketball. But if you told me Virginia Tech was 2-3 in the ACC, but 52nd in the net at this point, I'd be like, oh yeah, I mean that's not terrible. Like, Tech is in a position to do something. And I think that's the most important thing.
And the problem here for me, all right, Tech only won 9 non-conference games. So to get to 21 wins, which you probably got to get to go to the NCAA tournament as an large, unless you just have an obscene number of Q1 wins. That means you got to go 12-8 in the ACC, right? To get to 21 wins.
Yeah.
That's really hard to do. And now Tech is 2-3. So Tech didn't win enough non-conference games. I don't like the 20-game ACC schedule. I think it actually makes it tougher for ACC teams to make the NCAA tournament. Give me 2 more cream puffs, steamroll them by 30, get your efficiency numbers up. You got 2 extra wins. It doesn't impact your number of quality wins all that much. I mean, but it gives you 2 extra wins. Your computer numbers are going to be, your efficiency numbers are going to be better. Your Q1 win-loss record probably isn't going to change all that much, if at all. And it just makes your computer numbers rather. I know why they're doing it. They do it for money and everything like that. But I would feel better right now if Virginia Tech had won 10 or 11 non-conference games as opposed to just 9. I would never feel good about making the NCAA tournament if you win single-digit non-conference games. But you play so few non-conference games this year these days that you have to do really well in conference play, and that's just a very difficult thing to do.
They're going to be stuck in the Boeheim zone there, like
I know,
like borderline where they make the tournament. You seem like the latter half of his career, it was like that every single year. It's like, will Syracuse get in as a 13 seed or a 12 seed? Well, and if they did, they'd like make the Final Four somehow. Like, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, but like in that situation, you're not playing an ACC game in December either.
Right.
Well, Andy just recapped my childhood in a nutshell, so thank you for that. I'll tell you who doesn't have a bad loss. That's Virginia Tech women's basketball. But first, as always, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. As our presenting sponsor, First Bank and Trust Company's support has been invaluable to TSL, helping us to bring you all the great content across all of our platforms. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Bank with First Bank and Trust Company. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. Okay, they're coming off the heels of a loss to number 21 Florida State. That jolts Florida State to 15th in the country. Virginia Tech falls from 11 to 14th in the country. Solid win over Miami on Thursday in front of a pretty good crowd in the Castle. And then again, that tough loss against Florida State. First ACC loss for the Hokies. David, no need to panic. Florida State looks like they're going to be pretty good, and we know how difficult the ACC can be.
Florida State's very good. I don't think Florida State was getting enough credit from anybody. I mean, this is a team that's 14-4, 5-1, and I think depending on who you play, right? Like Florida State has already played Carolina and NC State, and now Virginia Tech. Their Noles are building up a really good resume. Tanaya Latson and Michaela Timpson are usually the ones that get a lot of the credit, get a lot of the love in the spotlight. Sarah Bajetti had 31 and 8 and 3 for Florida State on Sunday. That's a really good Florida State team, and especially when you're playing on the road.
With some brutal calls down the stretch.
Oh yeah.
Should I tuned in at the tail
Sure,
end.
yeah. You can chime in, bring up the calls.
Like, first off, there's one that Amor looked like she dribbled off the Florida State defender's foot.
Yeah.
And they're like, it was out on Amor, and it's like, did you even look at the play? Like, she looked confused when they called that the other way, and then the offensive foul on Kitley at the end was just
that was bad.
In that spot. Like, I think they were down, 5 at that point? 3 point.
So the refs cost Tech the game.
Well, I'm not going to say that. I'm just saying you would expect a little bit better officiating in crunch time in that situation.
There were some kind of egregious calls. So the one Andy is mentioning at the end, it was a 3-point game. Tech's inbounding the ball. Georgia Amor passes it in Elizabeth Kitley. She catches it and goes to hand it off. Just simple execution of a dribble handoff. Georgia Amore gets it and takes like 2 steps, and the ref calls a foul because the Florida State defender guarding Georgia Amore ran into Kitley, who had the ball in her hand.
Right.
So they called an offensive foul on Kitley, who had the ball and was just standing there handing it off.
And she was not moving.
No. Even the broadcaster was like, I don't know what you want her to do.
I thought
I saw the play. I was watching the game at the gym, but I didn't. The volume was not on, so I couldn't hear what the announcers were saying.
The announcers were kind of like, okay, that wasn't great. Remember, this was on main ESPN channel. When they came back out of the break, Rebecca Lobo and Andrea Carter just reamed the officiating.
Yeah,
like
Rebecca
Lobo was like, that is a horrible call. But I think, to get back on topic, that's not the reason why Virginia Tech lost this game. Elizabeth Kitley is playing some of the best basketball in the country, and if Caitlin Clark didn't exist, I think Elizabeth Kitley would have a legit shot to win National Player of the Year. I mean, back-to-back 30-pointers, and
she's a regular Sean Pedulla.
I processed that and was like, I need to go look up to if there's ever been a time where it definitely has not happened, where 2 Virginia Tech players have had men's and women's 30-point games in the same week. That's how good Elizabeth Kitley is, and she's playing unreal right now. I mean, against Miami, she had 31 and 11. She casually has 30 and 12 against Florida State.
But she had 26 at half against Miami, something like that.
23
at half,
record, which was a record for most points in a first half by a Virginia Tech player.
Wow.
This Virginia Tech team is continuing to learn about itself. Rose Mishaw, I thought she, in some ways, was one of the most important players in this game for Virginia Tech. She had 12 points. Virginia Tech, though, is still trying to find a rhythm. Georgia Amore spent a good chunk of the second quarter in foul trouble, and Tech had to roll with a lineup of Kayla King running point, Matilda Eck on the wing, Olivia Somiel, who they then subbed out for Karis Baker, Clara Strack, who they then subbed out for Rose Mishaw, and Elizabeth Kitley. None of those are true point guards. Kayla King did play point guard in high school, but that was the group that came in and played about the final 4.5 minutes after Carly Wenzel picked up her 3rd foul, and they outscored Florida State 14-7. That's not a normal lineup. And I think if you're Kenny Brooks, you go, oh, okay, that was pretty good. And then Florida State kind of picked up some steam at home. This is a team that had not lost to an ACC team since January 26th of last year.
Virginia Tech.
That was Duke.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech had not lost in 15. Virginia Tech had won 15 consecutive games against ACC opponents. That included the long win streak ACC championship.
And what's today's date?
The 16th.
So almost a year Virginia Tech went without losing to an ACC team.
That's crazy impressive. Gio, you and I were both in that press conference that Wes Moore had, where Wes Moore said the winner of this conference is not going to come out unscathed. There's going to be a loss or 2 or 3 or 4 because that's how good this league is. You saw it between the depth of Miami, who's a pretty good team that just did not play well on Wednesday, and then Florida State. I think the biggest key for Virginia Tech going forward, Elizabeth Kitley's playing great basketball. She was 14 of 28. Like, when you scored 30 points on 14 of 28 and you only attempt 3 free throws, that's a pretty good basketball game. But Tech has to continue to figure things out around her. I think the key is Georgia Amore, as you would expect. She was 6 of 17. I think she's been forcing it a little bit. I actually think the way Sean Pedulla has been playing lately is something that, and I'm not saying Georgia Amore needs to go in the film room and watch film of Sean Pedulla play because she's a great player. But when you just compare the 2 Virginia Tech point guards right now, who are both very, very good, these last couple games, Pedulla's kind of let it come to him and has played more within the offense. And I think Georgia Amore, she sometimes feels like she has to score. She didn't feel like that last year because she was pass first until she got to January, February, March. She's a good player, and Tech's going to figure it out. And, The last time Tech lost an ACC game, it won 15 straight games and went to the Final Four. Like I don't know if I would expect that, but
As long as they don't get bad refs again, they probably will.
Tech bounces back from losses usually in a good manner. So, I can imagine, what Amor is going to look like on Thursday when Tech goes to Duke. That's a really good Duke team that's going to play them really, really physical. That's a quadrant 1 opportunity. Big week for both Virginia Tech basketball teams.
Well, that transitions us nicely here to wrap things up for the day. Duke coming up. Duke's not quite what they were last year. They were a very, very good team last year. Gave Virginia Tech some trouble. Then Tech was able to take care of business when they played them again in the Castle. That was a fun revenge game towards the end of the ACC regular season last year. What do we know about the Blue Devils before the Hokies head into Cameron Indoor on Thursday night?
This is a very good defensive team. That's kind of the staple of Kara Lawson. Duke was a insanely good defensive team last year, but Celeste Taylor, the point guard, she was right up there with, I want to say she won Defensive Player of the Year last year in the conference. She transferred to Ohio State, who, if you're a Virginia Tech fan and you remember watching that game, you remember how good Ohio State was defensively last season. This Duke team only returned 2 starters from last year's team. Cheyenne Day Wilson, who started for the Blue Devils last year, went to Miami. Tech saw her on Thursday. This is a very different Duke team. 3 scores in double figures, brought in some transfers. Again, very good defense. Virginia Tech, last time it went down to Durham, it lost. And that was kind of a wake-up call. And I'm curious to see what this loss to Florida State kind of triggers for Tech. How does Tech respond? How do you bounce back? And this is a good chance on the road against a team that is going to be very, very physical. I remember sitting in Kenny Brooks' press conference in Cameron Indoor last year after the game, and Elizabeth Kitley basically gotten beat up all game. And it was the way Duke had played and what Tech did afterwards. Because Kenny Brooks was so frustrated, he jokingly said, he was like, I'm going to tell Elizabeth Kitley, if this is how the officiating is going to be, I'm going to tell Elizabeth Kitley not to come back next year. Because he was so fed up and frustrated with how, Kitley had 2 or 3 people on her the entire game and she was just getting beat up. What Tech did after that, I think, kind of changed the trajectory of the season. Tech started moving Kitley around. And you saw that a little bit against Miami. You saw that a little bit against Florida State. Kitley's comfortable stepping out and hitting that shot from the elbow or hitting the mid-range jumper from over here. Tech always runs that curl where she comes off a screen under the basket and she catches it and she fades away from the baseline. That Duke game kind of opened things up and got Kenny Brooks thinking, what does this Florida State loss do? What does Tech realize? And I think it could be a similar thing with Georgia Amor. Not that she played bad. She had 13 points, but when you take 17 shots, I think if it was Elizabeth Kitley doing that, but she still had 15 and 12, people might go, oh, okay, well, it was just another day for Kitley and they were hounding her inside. I think Amor has a little bit more of a spotlight on her because she's the person that has the ball in her hands almost the entire game. How does Virginia Tech respond? Gio, you asked, that's a really good Duke team. You have to win on the road in this league. It's very, very difficult. Tech just lost on the road. I think we'll know a lot more after this game, and then Tech's back at home against a Clemson team that's kind of around 85 to 95 in the net. That's back in Castle on Sunday. Big week for Virginia Tech basketball, and guess what? I'll be at all 4 games.
I'll see you. We'll see you down in Charlottesville, then we'll see you down in Durham as well, guys. What's coming up on Tech Sideline throughout the week?
I wrote myself down for a basketball column. I'd originally scheduled it for tomorrow, but since Tech plays UVA tomorrow, I think I'll go ahead and do it on Thursday instead. And then Brandon Patterson is starting his scouting reports of Virginia Tech's transfer portal guys.
Sweet.
So he's doing his first one on Aeneas Peoples, and it'll be posted on Thursday, and then Friday Q&A like normal on Friday. So that's what I've got coming up.
Yeah, basketball stuff for me. I'll have 2 stories, a game recap, and some takeaways from at least each of the next 3 games while Tech is on the road. I'm very curious to see how the men do. I think last time Virginia Tech men won in Charlottesville, was my freshman year of college. 2017-18. It took a big effort from Kerry Blackshear. At the time, it was one of the biggest wins in Virginia Tech men's basketball history on the road. Beat number 2 UVA on the road. I think Tech has a good chance to win. Then the women are on the road. The men are on the road again. Lots of basketball stuff for me. Andy, what you got coming up this week?
TBD.
Okay, I like that.
right.
I wasn't here at this time last year, so I'm kind of figured out my place in the off season because Chris does a lot of analytical stuff football wise. Probably at some point I'll do a depth chart type thing, but it's kind of similar to what you had last week, so I don't want to run that straight out this week. So
we do
maybe wait a little while.
We'll probably overlap a little bit this offseason, so feel free to take advantage of this downtime.
Well, Chris was covering for me while I was in Hawaii, so I can't complain.
You
It
have a good
wasn't too
trip?
much to cover, yeah.
You had a good trip?
Oh, it was a great trip. Canoeing, whale watching, hiked up a mountain, was stars at night. It was fantastic.
Pearl Harbor.
So I did that in Honolulu.
Nice.
Universal Studios, hit it in LA on the way out there. So
Nice.
yeah, it was a packed 10-day trip, I think it was. My dad was turning 80, so the whole family flew out to Hawaii. To go see him out
So
there.
are you extra cold this week after being in decent weather?
It wasn't great.
Really?
Coming back to it. I mean, I don't like it. I'd rather be in the Hawaii weather.
Well,
So-
you're used to Minnesota weather.
I am. People say that. I've
you
not
never-
lived in Minnesota
That's
in
true.
21 years now, so it's been a minute.
Yeah.
I think I've actually almost lived in the South in Virginia as long as I lived in the North in Minnesota, Wisconsin.
You know who's used to the snow?
I'm loving the
Giovanni
snow. I mean,
here.
this was me yesterday, literally just planted on the couch, watching the snow fall the entire day out the window as NFL was on all day. It was fantastic.
I like the snow. I hated the previous days when the wind was blowing like crazy.
Yeah.
When it snows, the wind stops blowing.
Yes.
And it's actually warmer.
Here's the thing. I'd rather it snow like it did Monday and Tuesday. I'd rather it snow a bunch than it was like Friday or Saturday where it was like, oh, it's supposed to snow, and it didn't. It just got very, very cold and nothing happened.
First of all, Gio, sitting inside and watching the snow isn't like some north, like, oh, look at this tough northerner. He enjoys sitting inside.
Are you going to Buffalo this week?
Oh, I would
Anybody
love
can
to,
sit
but no.
inside and enjoy the snow. It's like,
Well, it's
I
supposed to be
enjoy
7
sitting inside and watching the snow.
It's supposed to be
7
get down to
degrees.
7 degrees tonight. You should
Yeah.
enjoy that. Saturday, a high of 18 with a low of 6. Maybe I'll go on vacation somewhere this weekend.
Nothing is worse than when, and it did this the whole time I was in Syracuse over break, when it's like 35 and raining. Like, I'm so glad that it's cold enough to snow. We got some snow because it didn't snow at all here last year.
Yeah.
Not at least when I was here. So we got a good snow freshman year. We get a good snow here. Feels a little more like home. So, anyways, appreciate you guys. Everyone stay safe out there with the weather. That'll do it for episode 341 of the Tech Sideline podcast. We'll see you next week.